Hello everyone. It's been a while since I posted my last video, but it is 2012, and because it is a new year, I wanted to get back into it, and because it is 2012, I think we're in for some awesome experiences collectively as well as individually this year, so I just wanted to get back at it and start afresh. So what I wanted to talk about for my first video of 2012 was thought, and what thought is, and a little bit about the process of thinking. I've touched on this subject before, but I feel like it's been a while since I really sort of had a conversation with myself and broke it down, so I wanted to share that with you. So I think the first thing is the distinction between thought and thinking. The process of thinking is really the process of chopping up, organizing thought. And thought itself is really what I want to get into, because thought itself is a little bit more non-physical and a little bit more incredible than we usually understand it to be. And that's usually because we take it for granted. When you really sit down and sort of turn inward and analyze your own process of thinking and producing thoughts, it really gets interesting and can show you a lot about your non-physical nature, or at least your identity as a non-physical being. So all thought begins with your will. And your will is like your intention or your internal urge to do something, your internal movement. And what I mean by that is before you think a thought, you have a maybe less than obvious urge to think that thought that eventually produces an image or a concept or a word or whatever it is in your actual mind. So the will is the originator or initiator of the process of thinking, which is organizing thought. So the will is kind of like the center of your mental being, and all thinking and thought is movement outwards from that center and a return to that center to formulate a new thought or process of thinking. So for example, I know in one of my earlier videos I used the example of the pink elephant. Before you can actually picture that pink elephant in your mind, you have to know what that thought will be before you think it. So what that means is contained within your experience of willing that thought to exist as an image or a concept or a word or something in your mind, you have to know what it is. And that's kind of how I define what knowledge was. It is the knowledge, for lack of a better term, that comes with direct experience, that exists without having a need for, or without there needing to be an image or definition. So you can know what that thought will be before you think it, and you have to know what that thought will be before you think it, otherwise you wouldn't be able to think it. So when you think a thought, you are initiating a process that begins in the center or in your will and ends, for lack of a better term, in the conscious awareness of the thought you have chosen to think. So really what you're doing is digging into a part of your subconscious awareness and actually pulling something, or like you're fishing something out of it. So really you are aware of everything that is in your subconscious, you're just not consciously aware of all of it at one time. So part of this whole process of meditation and expansion of awareness is to become more aware of what is present in your subconscious so that you can influence the nature of your subconscious. And we'll get back to why that's important. So for example, have you ever had like a song stuck in your head or something? I know I have this all the time. But a song that is stuck in your head is actually something that you are continuously generating, or you are experiencing that song playing over and over and over because you are choosing to generate that music in your head. Now, the reason we can't usually get it out of our heads when we want it to, and the reason that it gets stuck in the first place, is because the point of initiation of that thought is beneath our conscious mastery. And what that means is it is as yet beneath our conscious ability to control. That doesn't mean it's outside of your control, because obviously that song doesn't stay stuck in your conscious awareness forever and ever and ever, hopefully. At some point during the day, your mind shifts, and it's usually due to our changing awareness on a conscious level. We become involved in other things. We start a project, we get focused on something else, and we don't think about that song anymore, and we stop generating it over and over. And so I use that as an example to show you how you actually do influence the nature and content and repercussions of what is contained in your subconscious. And we usually do that without thinking about it or without consciously knowing how we did it. But you can do it consciously. Now, in the movie Inception, they actually gave you some indication of our abilities to do that, because if you remember, that one guy's consciousness they hacked into was militarized. In other words, they taught his subconsciousness to defend itself from people trying to steal stuff. So it is possible to teach your subconsciousness all different kinds of things. And it is your subconsciousness that determines the nature of the reality that you experience. It's kind of like your subconscious is an inertial, or like it carries a certain momentum over into your conscious awareness. And your conscious awareness also, in turn, affects what your subconscious contains. So there's like a give and take between those two. And if you learn how to master training your subconscious to create inertial movement, for lack of a better term, in a certain direction, then you are well on your way to understanding how to master this thing that is the self, that we are all busy trying to figure out. So in this way, it's also possible to know many, many things about what this reality is without having, I guess you could say, experienced it as part of your physical experience of reality. And it gets a little bit more, I guess, metaphysical and esoteric in terms of the explanation, but I'm just going to lay it out there and do my best to explain it. So what you do when you think thoughts is tap into a collective awareness of sorts and choose what to bring back with you. So as I mentioned before, you know what those thoughts will be before you will them into your conscious mind. So in other words, you know everything. It's just a matter of being able to work or to go into your subconscious and pick out what it is you want to bring to the surface. And it's a matter of being able to be consciously aware of certain things that are in your subconscious. Takes practice, takes training, takes self-mastery. So anyway, you are connected to everyone and everything on this subconscious wavelength, we'll call it. And when you think conscious thoughts, you are fishing for things out of that sort of sea of waves. So when you are involved in the process of understanding who and what yourself actually is, you are expanding your conscious capacity to maintain a greater awareness of what is in your subconscious or what is in the collective, as opposed to your individual conscious experience. And really they're all connected and all one and the same, but there's a reason for the division between conscious and subconscious. And one of the reasons is to give us the space we need from all the junk that is in our subconscious, so we can be able to focus enough to sort of attack each, I guess you could say, problem in our subconscious one at a time. So we can have the space we need to actually clean the junk out of it so it can work properly. Because if we were immersed in our subconscious without knowing how to operate within it, that would just create chaos in our experience. So if you've ever had like dreams that you thought made no sense, or, well, that's a pretty good example. Dreams that you think make no sense, they pretty much always mean something, but as far as what that means, that's up to you. But if you've had dreams that make no sense, or you can't do what you want in dreams, for example, you don't know how to lucid dream on command almost, and I know that is an example of someone having gained greater mastery over their subconscious realm anyway. So the reason that is important is because that gives you a very good idea of how to do that within your conscious realm, because reality is nothing more than your perception of that reality. So when you bring those same abilities that you gain in, for example, the lucid dreaming realm into your conscious experience of what is real, or at least what we think is real, then your ability to expand that conscious awareness so that it encompasses more of the totality of who and what you are is greatly, greatly magnified. So I recently got into learning a little bit about philosophy as it exists today, and all of it is really, really interesting, but I wanted to point out, or at least talk about something that I feel like I recognize with the development of thought, or the development of the process of thinking as it has evolved over the ages. So philosophy is generally thought to have been developed in its modern form by the Greeks, and of course, before the Greeks, the big civilization that we always talk about were the Egyptians. So something happens when you move from the Egyptian or the Cometian um, system of thought and thinking into the Greek or the more modern system of thought and thinking. And what happens is a greater rift or disconnect is put in place between the knowledge that comes through direct experience and what it is we think we are perceiving. Or if I can explain that a bit better, the knowledge you have access to as a result of your direct connection to what this reality is made more difficult to get at because we began to think more objectively. Now what that means is we put a division or separated ourselves from what we were thinking about, or the quote-unquote objects that we were thinking about. And when you do that, you cannot fully understand what that thing is because it can only be defined within certain parameters, and those parameters are limited by your perception. So when you expand your perception and recognize anyway that your interface with reality has a lot of information in it, then you can go beyond the limitations of your current perception and understand better what that thing, quote unquote, is. So I always use this example. It's like love. Love is what we would think of as a non-physical thing, and you can't really come to an ultimate definition of it. However, you can know exactly what it is if you have experienced it. So not everyone experiences it in the same way. However, there is a commonality of experience. And in reality, this physical experience that we think is the only thing that is real is exactly that. It is a commonality in our subjective experience. So when you begin to break down your own subjectivity and expand your ability to be aware of what is beyond your current perceptual limitations, you are actually moving beyond the sort of collective bubble of subjective experience that we find most of ourselves to be in. So as I was mentioning, with the slight division that happens as you move from Egyptian or even more ancient Kemet to the more modern Greek, the division that is put in place separates you from the reality and separates you from the awareness of your interface with that reality, and in so doing puts a box around what you are able to understand about that reality. So this is not a bad thing. I am in no way saying that the people like Pythagoras and all those guys were not absolute geniuses. They were absolute geniuses. But I'm saying that what is happening throughout the course of history is a increase in the process of fractionalization in terms of how we perceive our reality. So instead of our reality being one cohesive whole coming to us through an expanded perception, it gets divided and subdivided and subdivided into smaller categories, and our vision narrows greatly until we are stuck in this illusion and not knowing how to get out of it. So it's very, very difficult to try to think your way out of it. You have to feel your way out of it. Well, really, you have to recognize that there are more ways of thinking than just using your intellect, and there are more ways of gaining information than just using your intellect. The difference between someone being able to use their quote-unquote non-physical abilities to gain valuable information and someone not being able to is practice and a dedication to knowing the reality of who and what we are. Because it has to be highly refined. And of course, it takes practice, but that's not to say you can't initiate that process within 5 or 10 minutes. You totally can. It's just whether or not you are driven to do that. And certain people are driven to do that, whereas others are not. They're happy where they are. I know, for example, for myself, I can remember thinking about these questions for most of my life. I was meant to do this, whatever it is that I'm doing. I was supposed to be doing it, and supposed to be putting it out there in the hopes that anyone else who was at a similar point in their journey, let's say, that it would spark something in them, and hopefully it would trigger that same realization with them, and more than that. So, getting back to what I was saying about 2012, this is one of those years in history where, I believe anyway, thought on a collective level is about to change absolutely radically. And again, our collective thought is what determines the reality that we experience, because we are, as I mentioned before, all taking part in a common subjective experience. So when you change the nature of your subconscious, when you change what is in your subconscious by choosing to expand your conscious awareness, and therefore change what is sort of being passed to your subconscious, you literally change the reality that you perceive. Now, when it happens on a collective level, I don't even know what's going to happen. But some friends have been telling me some very, very interesting things, people that I hold in very, very high regard. And I have experienced some stuff that is, I think, going to be more commonplace on a global collective level, but we'll just wait and see what happens. But in the meantime, welcome to 2012. I hope you have a good year. Congratulations on making it this far, and I will see you in my next video.